When a wealthy family publicly humiliates a village girl at her own wedding and tries to destroy her life, they never expect her childhood best friend, the president's daughter, to walk in and turn their power into shame. The morning light poured softly through the tall windows of Grace Divine Baptist Church, wrapping everything in a golden glow. 200 guests sat quietly in white decorated rows, programs folded neatly in their hands. A gentle melody floated through the air, steady and sacred, the kind of music that makes even the restless sit still. At the altar stood Quabana, tall and composed, though his eyes shimmered with emotion. He had waited for this moment. He had chosen love over wealth, over inheritance, over comfort. And today he would choose it again. Then the doors opened. Adoa stepped inside. She wore a dress she had sewn with her own hands, white silk stitched with delicate gold thread, every bead placed carefully, every seam holding a memory. It was not designed by a famous name. It was crafted by sacrifice. Her mother walked beside her, proud and tearful, her hand gently resting over her daughter's. Guests whispered softly, smiling. Some wiped tears. Adoa walked slowly down the aisle, her heart beating loudly in her ears. She kept her eyes on the man waiting for her. After everything, we made it. She reached the altar. Her mother kissed her forehead and stepped aside. The pastor smiled warmly and began. Beloved, we are gathered here today. The church doors exploded open. The sound was violent against the sacred silence. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was Mrs. Theodora Mensa. Tall, elegant, dressed in gold, her presence sharp and commanding. Behind her stood her husband, her daughter, and a man in a dark suit holding a folder of documents. Stop this wedding. Her voice cut through the church like glass. The music died instantly. The pastor froze. Guests shifted in confusion. Mrs. Theodora began walking down the aisle slowly, deliberately, her heels echoing against the floor. She did not look at her son. She looked only at Adoa. This marriage cannot proceed, she announced. I have proof that this woman is committing fraud. A collective gasp filled the room. Quabana stepped forward. Mother, what are you doing? She is marrying you for immigration benefits, Mrs. Theodora said coldly. She has lied about her status. Immigration authorities have been informed. The man in the suit lifted the papers slightly, as if that alone were enough to condemn her. The room shifted. Whispers began. Eyes changed. Doubt spread. Adoa felt her breath shorten. Her fingers trembled against her bouquet. This was a lie, a cruel, calculated lie. She had built her life honestly. She had worked for every document, every right. But who would believe her over a family like the Mensas? Was this how her dream would end? Not with vows, but with shame? She looked at Quabana. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning with anger. But the damage was already done. The sacred air had turned heavy. Suspicion hung over her like smoke. They want me to break. Not here. Not now. The pastor hesitated, unsure whether to continue. Mrs. Theodora stopped just a few feet away from the altar. This wedding is illegal, she said calmly. And it will not happen. The church stood frozen between love and accusation. And in that fragile silence, everything Adoa had fought for trembled on the edge of collapse. Sometimes the greatest battles begin at the very moment you think you have won. Long before the white silk dress, before Atlanta, before accusations and chandeliers, there was a small house in Kumasi. Not the part tourists photograph. Not the clean streets lined with painted gates. This was the side where the roads turned to mud when it rained, where children shared textbooks because there were not enough to go around, and where dreams had to fight to survive. That is where Adoa Sarpong was born. Her home was simple. 2 small rooms, a wooden table near the window, and a sewing machine that hummed from morning until night. That machine was her mother's lifeline. Mama Akojua was known in the neighborhood not for wealth but for her hands. Hands that could turn scraps of fabric into something beautiful. Hands that could stitch dignity into worn-out cloth. Adoa would sit on the floor as a little girl, watching carefully. The rhythm of the needle felt like music. Thread in, pull tight, Fold. Stitch again. Fabric listens if you respect it, her mother would say softly. By the age of 10, Adoa could thread a needle faster than most adults. By 16, she was sewing full dresses. By 20, women from 3 villages away came to their home asking for her designs. They did not have much. Sometimes the lights flickered out. Sometimes dinner was smaller than they hoped. But inside that small house there was discipline. There was faith. There was pride. At night, when the rain tapped against the tin roof, Adoa would lie awake and imagine something more. Not riches, not luxury, just possibility. I will build something bigger than this street. But how does a girl from a mud road build a future the world refuses to see? She saved every coin she earned. She wrapped bills carefully and hid them inside a tin under her bed. While other girls dreamed of weddings, she dreamed of storefront windows. While others waited to be rescued, she sharpened her skill. Her mother never once told her to settle. "You are not poor," Mama Akojua would say. "You are prepared." Prepared for what? Adoa did not fully know. But she felt it, a calling beyond Kumasi. A life waiting somewhere across the ocean. When she was 24, she stood at the airport holding a one-way ticket to America. $200 in her bag. A sewing machine shipped ahead. And her mother's hands cradling her face. "You have your gift," Mama Akojua whispered. "And that is more powerful than money." As the plane lifted into the sky, Adoa looked down at the land that shaped her. The world would call her a village girl. But they did not understand something important. The mud roads did not weaken her, they built her. Because sometimes the strongest women are not raised in comfort. They are forged in struggle. Atlanta felt different from Kumasi. The streets were wider, the buildings taller, the pace faster. But inside a small shop on a quiet side road, Adoa carried the same discipline her mother had taught her. Her shop was simple: 1 room, 1 sewing machine, 1 dress form in the window. The sign outside read Sarpong Tailoring. There were no bright lights, no luxury decorations. But there was care in every stitch. Brides came to her when they could not afford famous designers. Mothers trusted her with their daughters' wedding gowns. Word spread quietly, the way good news often does, from one satisfied customer to another. Adoa worked long hours. She cut fabric carefully, measured twice, sewed late into the night. She built her business with patience, not shortcuts. Every dress she created carried her story: strength, humility, and hope. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. A tall man stepped inside. He was well-dressed, confident, and calm. He looked like someone who belonged in expensive offices, not small tailoring shops. "I need a suit altered," he said politely. "Someone recommended you." His name was Quabana Mensa. Adoa noticed his suit immediately, high quality, carefully tailored. She did not show surprise. She treated every client the same. Professional, respectful, focused. She measured him quickly and promised the work would be ready on time. When he returned, the suit fit perfectly. He offered to pay extra. "I don't overcharge," she replied gently. "The price is fair." That was the moment he truly noticed her. Not just her skill, but her character. Quabana asked her to dinner. Adoa hesitated. She had orders to complete, bills to pay, a future to build. Men like him lived in a world far from hers. This could complicate everything. But something in his voice felt sincere, not playful, not arrogant, just curious. "One dinner," she agreed, carefully. That dinner became another, then another. They talked about dreams, family, faith, and work. Quabana listened when she spoke. He asked about her mother. He admired her business. He never made her feel small. When he sat inside her tiny shop, watching her sew, he did not see poverty. He saw talent. He saw strength. But beneath the laughter and shared meals, a quiet truth remained. Their worlds were built differently. His family owned property. His name carried influence. Her life had been built from fabric scraps and faith. Love grew naturally between them, without pressure, without performance. Felt simple, real. Yet sometimes the strongest storms do not begin with thunder. they begin with silence. Adoa knew the difference in their backgrounds would one day matter. She just did not know how soon. Because love can cross any distance. But the world does not always cross it kindly. And sometimes, the heart chooses before the consequences arrive. The Mensa home in Buckhead stood behind tall gates, quiet and polished. The driveway curved smoothly, leading to a house that looked powerful even before you entered it. Everything was elegant, the columns, the garden, the shining windows. Quabana held Adoa's hand as they walked toward the door. "Whatever happens," he whispered gently, "I am with you." Adoa nodded, trying to steady her breathing. When the door opened, Mrs. Theodora Mensa stood in the entrance. She was tall, perfectly dressed in gold-trimmed fabric, her posture confident and controlled. Her smile was polite, but it did not reach her eyes. So this was the woman her son loved. She looked at Adoa carefully, from head to toe, as if assessing something unfamiliar. "This is Adoa," Quabana said proudly. Mrs. Theodora extended her hand slowly, but only for a moment. The handshake was brief, distant. "Welcome," she said in a smooth voice. Dinner was set at a large dining table filled with fine dishes and crystal glasses. Chief Maxwell sat at the head, observing quietly. Abigail, Quabana's sister, watched Adoa with a small, knowing smile. The conversation began politely. Questions about Adoa's background, her work, her plans. "I run a tailoring business," Adoa explained calmly. "It is growing every month." "How wonderful," Mrs. Theodora replied, folding her hands. "It is admirable when people are willing to serve others." The word serve lingered in the air. Adoa felt it, the subtle tone beneath the compliment. Not praise, judgment. "They are testing me." Abigail glanced at Adoa's dress. "Did you make that yourself?" "Yes," Adoa answered confidently. "I design and sew all my clothes." "How resourceful," Abigail said with a light laugh. The room remained quiet, but the tension was growing. Mrs. Theodora leaned back slightly. "Quabana tells us you grew up in Kumasi." "Yes, ma'am." "And your mother is also a seamstress?" "Yes, she taught me everything." Mrs. Theodora smiled again, this time colder. "A family tradition of service is interesting." The way she said it felt like a quiet warning. Quabana reached for Adoa's hand under the table, a silent message of support. But Adoa could feel the atmosphere shifting. The smiles were there. The manners were perfect. Yet something invisible was cutting through the room. They were not raising their voices. They were not arguing. But every question felt heavier than the last. Mrs. Theodora finally set down her glass. "One must think carefully about the future," she said gently. "About background. About what children will inherit." The implication was clear. Adoa kept her expression calm. Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "My mother taught me that character is built through actions, not wealth." Silence fell across the table. For a moment no one spoke. Mrs. Theodora studied her again, her gaze unreadable. It was not open rejection. It was something more dangerous, quiet disapproval wrapped in elegance. The dinner continued, but the warmth had disappeared. Adoa realized something important that night. Sometimes people do not insult you loudly. They smile while they decide you do not belong. And in that house, beneath the crystal lights and polite conversations, she understood clearly. Acceptance would not come easily. Because when hearts are divided by pride, love must stand stronger than the daggers hidden inside a smile. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the front window of Sarpong Tailoring. The shop was calm. Fabric hung neatly along the walls. Adoa was measuring a client for a bridesmaid dress, focused and professional, her hands steady as always. The bell above the door suddenly rang. Mrs. Theodora Mensa stepped inside. She did not look rushed. She did not look emotional. She looked controlled, as if she had come to complete a task. Behind her, Abigail followed quietly. Adoa paused and greeted them politely. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Mensa. I need a private conversation," Mrs. Theodora said smoothly. Adoa finished the client's fitting with patience. She refused to rush her work. After the client left, the shop felt quieter, heavier. Mrs. Theodora sat down without invitation. She placed a large envelope on the table between them. "This engagement cannot continue," she began calmly. Adoa kept her posture straight. "Quabana and I love each other." Mrs. Theodora did not respond to the emotion in her voice. Instead, she slid the envelope forward. Inside were stacks of cash, $100,000. The money looked unreal in that small room. It was more than Adoa had ever seen in one place. It was power, pressure, and control wrapped in paper. "Take this," Mrs. Theodora said. "Walk away from my son. Leave Atlanta. Return to where you came from." The words were quiet but sharp. Adoa stared at the money. For a moment the room felt still. Her heart pounded, not with temptation, but with disbelief. "Do they truly think I can be bought?" She slowly looked up. "Do you believe money can replace love?" she asked softly. Mrs. Theodora's expression did not change. "Everyone has a price." Adoa stood up. Her voice remained steady. "I am not for sale." The silence in the room grew deeper. She pushed the envelope gently back toward Mrs. Theodora. "I will not leave the man I love. And I will not betray my dignity." Mrs. Theodora's smile faded. For the first time, irritation showed in her eyes. "Think carefully," she warned. "You do not understand what you are starting." Adoa met her gaze without fear. "I understand exactly," she replied. "And I still choose love." The envelope was taken back slowly. Mrs. Theodora stood. "Very well," she said coldly. "You will regret this decision." Then she walked out, Abigail following in silence. The door closed. The shop felt different now, no longer just a place of business, but the beginning of something much larger. Adoa sat back down, her hands trembling slightly, not because of fear of the money, but because she knew refusing it would have consequences. She had chosen honesty over comfort, integrity over escape, love over fear. And sometimes, when you refuse to be controlled, you do not just make a choice, you awaken a war. Because dignity may not cost money, but it can change everything. It did not start with shouting. It did not start with threats. It started quietly. One morning, Adoa arrived at her shop and noticed an envelope slipped under the door. The paper felt heavier than usual. Inside was a notice: her lease was being terminated. The building had been sold. The new owner required the space to be empty within 30 days. 30 days. She read the letter again, hoping she misunderstood. But the words did not change. Her hands went cold. "This cannot be a coincidence." She called the landlord immediately. His voice sounded nervous, distant. He apologized, but explained that the new ownership had already finalized everything. There was nothing he could do. Nothing. Adoa hung up slowly. The shop suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Days later, she tried to place her usual fabric order. The supplier declined. "Due to unforeseen circumstances," they said politely. Another supplier gave the same response. Then another. No arguments. No explanations. Just quiet refusals. Adoa stared at her phone in disbelief. How could every connection suddenly fail at the same time? Was it possible that someone had decided to erase her, without ever touching her directly? Clients began canceling appointments. The bride who had been visiting for months found another designer. The boutique that regularly ordered dresses stopped responding. Messages went unanswered. Phone calls went to voicemail. Her calendar slowly emptied. The shop, once full of energy and conversation, became silent. She walked around the room, touching the fabric that remained. Rolls of material that would soon be useless without new supplies. Dresses half-finished. Orders waiting. Her savings were limited. Every coin had been earned carefully. But without clients and materials, the business could not survive. One evening, Quabana arrived and saw the change in her eyes. "They're doing this," he said immediately. Adoa did not need to ask who. His family controlled real estate. They had influence, connections, power. But what hurt most was not the destruction itself. It was how clean it was. No public attacks. No habies confrontation. Just quiet pressure. Influence moving behind closed doors. They want me to give up on my own. Quabana tried to reassure her. He wanted to fight back. But Adoa knew that fighting an empire required more than emotion. She stood inside her shop one night after closing. The lights dimmed, the room nearly empty. Everything she had built from mud roads and determination now felt fragile. But even as fear crept in, she remembered her mother's voice. Character is built every day. They could take her lease. They could block her suppliers. They could remove clients. But they could not take her skill. And they could not take her heart. The destruction was not loud. It was strategic. And sometimes the most dangerous battles are the ones fought in silence, because silence gives the illusion of peace, while it slowly removes everything you work to create. But Adoa was not finished yet. The rehearsal dinner was meant to be small and intimate. Close family, a few friends, warm food, soft music, quiet laughter before the wedding day. Adoa wore a simple white dress she had designed herself. Elegant, calm, respectful. Quabana sat beside her, holding her hand under the table. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Then the doors opened. Mrs. Theodora Mensah entered without invitation. Behind her stood Chief Maxwell and Abigail. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversation stopped. Forks paused mid-air. The room grew silent. Mrs. Theodora walked in slowly, her expression controlled. "We heard there was a celebration," she said smoothly. "And surely, the mother of the groom should be present." No one responded. Quabana stood up. "You were not invited." Mrs. Theodora smiled faintly. "I don't need an invitation to attend my son's future." Her eyes moved across the room, then landed on Adoa. "You all should know who this woman is," she began, her voice calm but sharp. "She has manipulated my son. She is using him for financial security." Gasps filled the room. Adoa felt every eye turn toward her. Her heart began to race. "Stay calm. Do not react emotionally." She straightened her posture. Mrs. Theodora continued, louder now. "She comes from nothing. She saw an opportunity and took it. My son deserves someone from his own background." The words echoed in the room. Humiliation burned across Adoa's face, but she refused to look down. She stood up gently. "Mrs. Mensah," Adoa said clearly, "I have never asked Quabana for money or status. I love your son. That is all." The room was tense. Mrs. Theodora's expression hardened. "Love is convenient when it benefits you." Before Adoa could respond, Quabana stepped forward. His voice was steady. "Mother, stop." Everyone turned toward him. "This is the woman I chose," he said firmly, "and I will not allow you to disrespect her." Mrs. Theodora's eyes widened slightly. "If you marry her, you will lose everything. Your position, your inheritance, your place in this family." The silence deepened. Quabana looked at Adoa. Her eyes were filled with emotion, but she did not beg him to choose her. She simply waited. He turned back to his mother. "Then I will lose it," he said calmly, "because love is more important than money." Adoa felt tears rising, but she held them back. In front of everyone, Quabana took her hand. "This is my future," he declared. Mrs. Theodora stood frozen. Her plan to shame Adoa had backfired in front of witnesses. The room slowly began to breathe again, but the damage had been done. The humiliation lingered in the air. As they left the dinner that night, Adoa felt shaken, yet supported. Quabana had chosen her openly, without hesitation. And sometimes, when love is tested publicly, it reveals its true strength, not in wealth but in loyalty. Because real commitment does not hide when pressure arrives. It stands tall, even when it costs everything. The church was full of light. White flowers lined the aisle. Candles burned softly near the altar. Guests sat quietly, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Adoa stood beside Quabana, her hands slightly trembling, but her posture strong. She could hear her heartbeat. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the moment where love would finally be sealed with vows. Quabana looked at her and smiled gently. For a brief second, the world felt calm. The pastor raised his hands to begin. But before he could speak, the church doors burst open. The sound echoed through the room. Mrs. Theodora Mensah entered with confidence, followed by Chief Maxwell, Abigail, and a man carrying documents. "Stop this wedding immediately," she announced loudly. Every guest turned in shock. Adoa felt the air leave her lungs. Not again. Mrs. Theodora walked down the aisle slowly, holding up the papers in her hand. "This woman is committing immigration fraud," she declared. "She is marrying my son to secure citizenship." A heavy silence fell across the church. Whispers began spreading through the crowd. The man beside her lifted the documents. "We have evidence," he said. "Immigration authorities have been notified." Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked at Adoa differently now. Doubt entered the room like cold air. Adoa felt her body grow stiff. Her face remained calm, but inside, fear was rising. "This is not true. I worked honestly for everything." Quabana stepped forward quickly. "That is a lie. Her documents are legal. I have seen them myself." But Mrs. Theodora did not move. "Love has blinded you," she said. "She is using you. Once this marriage happens, she will have what she wants." The pastor hesitated, unsure how to proceed. The guests were no longer smiling. Some were now questioning. Others looked concerned. Adoa could feel eyes on her, judging, analyzing. Her reputation was hanging by a thread. Was this how everything would end, with suspicion instead of celebration? Her hands tightened slightly, but she did not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. Mrs. Theodora took another step forward. "If this wedding continues," she warned, "authorities will arrive within the hour. This ceremony will be considered illegal." Gasps filled the church. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Joy had turned into tension, celebration into fear. Quabana looked at Adoa. His eyes were filled with anger, but also concern. The world seemed to pause. Adoa stood still, breathing slowly, trying to stay grounded. She had done everything legally. She had nothing to hide. Yet power had entered the room, and with it, the ability to create doubt. In that moment, it felt like the dream was slipping away. But even when accusations are loud, truth does not disappear. It waits, because integrity may be questioned, but it cannot be erased. The church was heavy with tension. Whispers filled the air. The accusations still echoed in everyone's minds. Adoa stood at the altar, surrounded by doubt, her heart pounding quietly beneath her calm expression. Mrs. Theodora held her documents confidently. The room felt divided. Some guests looked uncertain. Others avoided eye contact. Then, from outside the church, engines roared. Not one, not two, multiple engines. The sound grew louder, powerful, commanding attention. Everyone paused. Through the tall windows, headlights flashed across the walls. Black vehicles lined up outside in perfect formation. Doors opened, one by one. 6 security officers entered first, dressed in formal black suits. They scanned the room carefully, professional and alert. Their presence was calm but unmistakably authoritative. The atmosphere changed instantly. Mrs. Theodora's confident expression began to fade. Then she walked in. An elegant woman in a gold dress stepped through the church doors. Her presence was quiet but undeniable. Her eyes searched the room until they found Adoa, and she smiled. "Adoa," she said softly, "I told you I would never miss your wedding." The church went completely silent. Guests recognized her immediately. The president's daughter. Nana Yafrimong. Mrs. Theodora's face lost color. Chief Maxwell stepped back slightly. Abigail looked confused. Nanaya walked slowly down the aisle, her security remaining at the entrance. She did not rush. She did not appear emotional, but she was firm. She reached Adoa and took both of her hands. "You should have called me," she said gently. Adoa's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to burden you," she whispered. Nanaya's expression shifted, calm but strong. "Burden me? You are my sister." The word carried through the church like a declaration. She turned toward Mrs. Theodora. Her voice remained steady. "Who is accusing my sister of fraud?" A sharp silence followed. Mrs. Theodora tried to respond, but her confidence was gone. Nana continued, "I have known Adoa since we were children in Kumasi. She has always been honest. She has built her life with integrity." She stepped forward slightly. "False accusations against her will not go unnoticed." The security officers stood clearly visible now. Power had entered the room. Not loudly, but decisively. Nana held up her phone and made a call on speaker. The room listened carefully. She spoke calmly, explaining the situation and mentioning the allegations. Her tone was professional, controlled. When she ended the call, she looked directly at Mrs. Theodora. "You may continue this performance," she said quietly, "but consequences will follow." The confidence that once filled Mrs. Theodora's posture had disappeared. Guests now looked at Adoa differently, not with doubt, but with realization. The balance in the room had shifted completely. What was meant to be humiliation had transformed into protection. Nana squeezed Adoa's hands gently. "You are not alone," she said. And for the first time that day, Adoa felt the truth settle in her heart. Support had arrived. Because sometimes power is not about control. It is about standing beside someone when it matters most. The church was still. After the arrival of the convoy and Nana's calm but powerful presence, the tension slowly began to settle. The accusations no longer carried the same weight. The security stood quietly at the back. The room understood one thing clearly: the balance had changed. Mrs. Theodora sat in the back row, silent. For the first time, she had no speech left. The pastor gently cleared his throat. "Shall we continue?" No one objected. The ceremony resumed. Quabana turned toward Adoa, his eyes full of emotion. The fear from moments ago had transformed into something stronger: certainty. The pastor asked the question again. "Do you, Quabana, take this woman to be your wife?" He did not hesitate. "Ido." His voice was steady, clear, confident. Adoa felt tears rise in her eyes. The pastor turned to her. "And do you, Adoa, take this man to be your husband?" The church felt like it was holding its breath. Adoa looked at Quabana. She remembered the journey, the mud roads, the sewing machine, the insults, the envelope of money, the accusations. She remembered standing alone. But not anymore. "I am not alone." With a deep breath, she answered, "Ido." The words echoed gently through the church. The pastor smiled. "You may exchange rings." Hands trembled slightly as rings were placed on fingers. Not because of fear, but because of emotion. Everything had been tested, and everything had survived. "By the power vested in me," the pastor announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Applause erupted. Guests stood. Some clapped. Some cried. Some smiled with relief. Quabana turned to Adoa and gently lifted her veil. "You are my home," he whispered. They shared their first kiss as husband and wife. The church filled with joy, not loud chaos, but genuine celebration. Later, at the reception, music played softly. The atmosphere felt lighter. Nana stepped away from the crowd and found Adoa near a quiet corner. They hugged tightly. "Nana Yasmail, why didn't you call me sooner?" Adoa lowered her eyes. "I thought I had to fight alone." Nana shook her head gently. "That's not strength. That's silence." She held Adoa's hands. "Next time you call. No matter what." Adoa nodded, tears in her eyes. "I promise." They stood there for a moment. Two girls who grew up together, now women with different paths but the same loyalty. One had power. The other had perseverance. But both had something stronger: trust. The wedding had almost been destroyed by pride and influence. Yet it ended in victory, not because of wealth, not because of status, but because someone kept a childhood promise. And in the end, the greatest triumph was not the ceremony itself. It was knowing that love, when protected by loyalty, can never be broken.